Мгм.
наша, як же православна церква на це все дивиться.
Мгм.
Отже, я не знаю, чи хтось буде чи не буде дивитися сьогодні, але слава Ісусу Христу!
Ну, ми побалакаємо. Слава навіки Богу Святому.
Окей, слава Богу, слава Богу. Отже, я бачу, що є двоє осіб, що дивляться вже, тому
Ну і
вітаю їх.
потіха.
Вітаємо їх. І тільки хотів сказати, що якщо є запитання, будь ласка, запитуйтеся. Якщо ні, то дайте принаймні
Слухайте.
нам знати, принаймні дайте нам знати, якою мовою ми маємо розмовляти. So to those of our visitors and friends that are watching from wherever you are, as COVID-19 gave us this one opportunity to explore, of course, online those presentations that you never thought about it before, but now we have this wonderful chance to chat and to broadcast it outside. Well, there's no limits actually all across the globe that you can do
Indeed.
it. So we're just asking, please ask questions, as well as please let us know which language you would prefer us to use. And we'll start our meeting tonight. We moved it to Thursdays because you are teaching at St. Andrews College, right?
St. Andrews College via Zoom, yes.
Via Zoom. Okay.
Every Friday.
Every Friday. Okay.
Until the beginning of April.
So we will, till beginning of April, we'll do that online on Thursdays. Yes. Okay. Окей, давайте скажемо молитву. Let's start with prayer. В ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. В ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. В ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Царю Небесний, утішителю душі істини, що всюди єси і все наповняєш, скарби добра і життя подателю, прийди і вселися в нас, і очисти нас від усякої скверни, і спаси благі душі наші. Слава Отцю і Сину, Святому Духу, нині повсякчас, на віки віків. Амінь. Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй, Отче, благослови.
Хай будуть милості великого Бога і Спаса нашого Ісуса Христа за всіма нами.
Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. So once again, we are asking people to please let us know which language to use. Ще раз просимо дати нам знати, котрою мовою розмовляти, для того, щоб вам було зручно.
En français, s'il veut.
Так.
S'il veut, en français. Или по-русски.
Так.
Можна і по-польську.
Так. Ukrainian English.
Okay, good.
Let's just do it that way. Отже, я хотів вас так як ви є професор етики у нас, колеги Святого Андрея, також цей курс вчили і at St. Paul's University and teaching in Montreal. I wanted to ask, хотів запитатися вас трошечки про сучасну ситуацію, правда? І про, ви казали, що ви сьогодні отримали вакцину, про вакцинацію і наше ставлення нашої церкви до цього процесу. I wanted to ask Father Igor, who is a professor of theology and a professor of ethics at St. Andrews College. He had been teaching a number of courses at St. Paul's University and also teaching in Concordia, right? You were teaching,
I have taught in Concordia and also Concordia. at Université de Québec à Montréal. Okay. But in English though.
Okay.
And I've also taught at McGill University.
So again, Father Igor's portfolio is quite broad in teaching, and I would like to use that opportunity to talk to Otets about current speculations, if you were to say it, right? And the speculations are what COVID-19 is. Of course, it's quite often you can see that on the margins of the media talking about the fact that it's some kind of conspiracy theory and stuff like that, as well as how our church looks at vaccination at vaccination per se.
Okay, well, I would say, although there is not any one, that we don't have a magisterium like the Roman Catholic Church has, where the Pope makes a declaration after it's been discussed by a commission that he has, and that is considered to be authoritative for the whole church. We in the Orthodoxy, we don't have that. We do have bishops, we have priests, we have many authorities. However, it's still possible to kind of get a consensus of what the church fathers would say. And I would say this, that uh, the church fathers do speak about the power of the Lord and miracles and so on, but they also tell us that we should not be putting the Lord to the test. And if there are normal medical ways to deal with the problem, or other problems, economic problems and so on, then they ought to be done that way, asking God to bless and to help and so on. We trust God. At the same time, God has given us. He has shared His authority and creativity with us so that we can make choices, so that we can investigate, we can do things, and that these things are real, they have meaning, and so on. So, seeing as how there is a vaccine which has been developed, and actually a number of vaccines which have been developed, and they are available for us to fight this pandemic which has come, we are perfectly perfectly okay to make use of them. And I, from the very beginning, even though I have often responded to folks who are saying, no, you should trust faith. And the other thing is the conspiracy thing, saying that it hasn't been tested and this is something that's going to scramble your DNA and so on. I've responded to those things on the internet and in other places and said, no, no, no. If the vaccine becomes available to me, I shall take it. And today, in fact, I did take it, and it was actually providential because the reason I was able to get it was because there is a former parishioner of mine and a continual friend of mine who is almost 88 years old, and he was contacted by the hospital that he is associated with to say that they want to give him the vaccine. The thing is, he cannot travel by himself, so he told them, "Well, I will be brought there by Father Ihor Kutash." So they called me and they said, "By the way, are you over 70?" I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Would you like to get the vaccine as well? Because we'll give it to you." I said, "Certainly." So I saw it as quite providential. So today, Taras got the vaccine, and so did I. And so far, I feel great. They say that there are some small reactions that sometimes do happen. They also say that about the flu vaccines, which, by the way, I also have taken every year, except for this year. This year, I've not taken it yet. I've never had any reactions, and to this moment, even though this happened some 5-6 hours ago, I don't have it. I feel perfectly okay. And I'm very pleased and grateful to have had the opportunity to get that vaccine.
It's
And we have to take another one on May 25th, around or thereabouts. They will contact us. A
it's
booster shot.
it's interesting that my wife also, because she works at the intensive care unit, my wife also have taken both shots, basically, first one and the second one. So the
Hmm.
first one was very easily, she had no reaction to it. But the second one, which she took almost 2 weeks ago, it severely impacted her. She was not feeling well for a while.
Mm.
For 2 days. She was.
So I'll see what happens in May.
So I'm not trying to scare you because
Oh,
every
no,
person
no,
has
I'm all right. I trust the Lord. And if the Lord says it's time for me to go home to Him, hey, blessed be the name of the Lord.
No. It was a weakness and her arm hurt, and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a challenge, but thank God she feels good now, and she's going to work, and she still continues to work at the intensive care
Praise
unit
the
in the
Lord.
Sligo hospital. And I hope she will do it for her work career yet at that place. Uh, I'm not quite sure when it'll be my turn here in Ontario to do that because I guess it's quite a while yet. But what I wanted to say, Ocha, is that I wanted to complete your statement, what you have said about the vaccine, by the statement of a Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. Я тільки хотів доповнити те, що отець Ігор сказав англійською мовою, те, що видано було Грецькою православною архідієцезією Північної Америки. Отже, і це вони мають спеціальну таке не публікацію, а постанову щодо цього. І зроблено це було 22 січня цього року. It's called a statement regarding development in medicine, COVID-19 vaccines and immunization. And they quoted gospel, they started with Gospel of St. Mark, chapter 2, verse 17. Christ came not to heal the healthy, but the sick, not to save the righteous, but the sinners. Interesting introduction, right? Mark 2:17. As the world continues to battle COVID-19, we are ever grateful to the frontline workers, including medical professionals, emergency responders, and scientists, for their unwavering dedication to making the world a better place. In light of the same, given our clergy and lay faithful are seeking a pastoral guidance regarding development in medicine, such as COVID-19 vaccines and immunizations, we offer the following guidance. So that's a Greek Orthodox Archdiocese in North America. Scripture encourages us to respect and protect the body as the temple of God. At the same time, it discourages us from either tempting or testing the Lord. And as your spiritual shepherds, we affirm and assure you that it is neither wrong nor sinful to seek medical attention and advice. In fact, we welcome interventions that provide us more time to spiritual renewal and repentance. We therefore encourage all of you, the clergy and lay faithful of our church, to consult your physicians in order to determine the appropriate course of actions for you, just as you do for surgeries, medication, vaccinations for other diseases, in cancer treatments, or other ailments. Indeed, while your own bishop, priest, or spiritual father remains prepared to assist you with spiritual matters, your personal doctor will guide you in individual medical decisions. Very wisely written. We trust that whatever course of action you and your doctor decide upon will also benefit the rest of the community. If we work together in a spirit of sincere compassion and care for one another, we will soon be able to gather together as a full community in our churches once again. We miss you ever much and eagerly await the day when we can all exchange the kiss of peace in a divine liturgy. So that's their pastoral letter, and I was.
That's lovely. If you could send me that by email, I would like to share that with my parish.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'll do it.
Not that anybody has ever, nobody in my parish has expressed doubt about this, and I've been quite forthright with them that if the vaccine becomes available as providentially it did today, I would take it.
Yeah. Well, також дуже важливо є сказати, це те, що в православній церкві ми не спокушаємо чи не спокушаємося нашою вірою, не спокушаємо Господа, знаєте. Господи, зроби так. Знаєш, якщо я в тебе вірю...
Мусиш чудо зробити, бо мусиш.
Так. Знаєте, значить, і це таке ніби як, по-перше, як віра в те, що Бог приймає такий, barter trade, if you were to say it, знаєте, бартерну зділку таку, чи, знаєте, спілку, що, Боже, я для тебе ось то роблю, а ти для мене мусиш це інше зробити, знаєте, тобто таке. Це по-перше. А по-друге, це надає Господу, знаєте, не Бог це не містерією, а певною такою містикою, знаєте, фокусом, таким, знаєте, що ось, Боже, значить, я попросив, Бог то раз і зробив. Знаєте, значить, тобто ми як фокусники стаємо, знаєте, а не як...
Так, якби Бог був якась комп'ютерна програма, що ти нажав правильні кнопки, і він мусить то робити. Між іншим, моя мама, Царство Небесне, Анна, вона вижила пандемію у 1918 році, яка була в Україні. Це була пандемія, я вже забув, що то було, але пандемія, дуже багато людей повмирали. Вона мала, і Ми вважаємо, що вона вижила чудесно. Вона мала велику гарячку, сумнівалася, чи вона виживе, і вона каже, що з ікони була ікона Святого Миколая. Вона побачила, як з ікони Святий Миколай її поблагословив, гарячка пройшла, і вона вижила. І вижила аж до 54-го року. Я народився в 47-му році, а вона у 54-му році захворіла на рак жолудка. І ми дуже молилися, щоб знову Господь її врятував, але Господь її забрав до себе. Так що бувають чуда, але їх вимагати не можна. І ми надіємося, що Господь своєю милістю знає краще, що повинно бути. Видно, що в той час для нашої мами Анни, Царство Небесне, якраз був той час, що вона мала перейти до небесного життя від земного життя. Але ми віримо, що і донині, що вона, і наш батько, і другі ми за нас заступаються там при престолі Господньому. Ми надіємось на це.
So, Oche, thank you for that. It was actually quite interesting to discuss that, especially in the today's date, about the vaccination and the issues, that quite often there is lots of speculations about this, right?
Yes.
And you can hear that sometimes people even come to me and meet me and saying, Oche, it's all conspiracy. It's that is done because of this and it is strangely enough coming from the people who are fairly well educated, so that's how it is, so такі вони справи.
Education doesn't necessarily change one's emotions, right? One's feelings. It simply gives more material to work with. But you are the one who makes the choices, and choices are not always made based on logic and rationality. A good deal of the choices are made on what you feel, and the feeling of fear, especially when things are so challenging as they are now. It's a very compelling fearing event, and what fear often tells you to do is, hide, double into yourself. Don't try anything new. Because what you've done till now has been okay. Don't try something else. Who knows if that vaccination will work? Many are saying it doesn't. Oh, better not. Better stay where you are.
Yes,
which is not a rational or logical thing to do.
But again, Oche, it's driven by fear too, because it's a known condition, a known situation. Lots of people are driven by fear because fear of the unknown, right?
That's exactly it. Fear is a very basic human emotion. Actually, it's a useful emotion. It keeps us out of all kinds of difficult situations, but it should not always be the guiding emotion. Fear should always be tested by rationality, by logic. Mm-hmm. Is there a good reason to fear this or not? If there's a good reason, yes, fear and take steps to protect yourself. If it's wrong, if there's not good reason to fear, then don't fear. Put it aside. If you're still afraid, give it to God. Ask God to help you. Yeah. And your guardian angel and your saints.
Patron saint. It's interesting that Vasil Kosenko from Ottawa said that he thanked us, but he also restated it very nicely. He said, don't take any steps in a blindfolded manner. Consult the medical professional you trust. Right. So, right. It's very important. God gave us our mind, our brain, and our ability. And thankfully, we live in Canada. We can go onto the doctor that is part of medical profession, and consult with him. And perhaps there could be medical conditions when doctor would say, no, you can't take it because it's too risky for you. But again, it has to be based on some information.
Our respect as the church for the medical profession could also be pointed out by the fact that one of the Gospels, the Gospel of St. Luke, was written by a physician. Luke is Saint Paul calls him the beloved physician. He was a physician. He was a doctor. The apostle Luke was a doctor, and he
Absolutely.
was a follower of Christ. And his gospel is absolutely amazing, wonderful.
It's interesting that, when you're talking about this information, it's interesting to mention also that all four gospels are written for are read in different types of our church year, and
Yes.
written to a different crowd, right? So, Gospel of Saint Matthew is considered extension of Torah, right? Is
It
written
is.
in attention to in mainly focusing on the Jewish population, who follow Christ, and then Gospel of Saint Luke are written to be geared towards the non-Jewish
Yeah.
population, and it's quite interesting. And as we start Great Lent in a couple of weeks, the Gospel of Saint Mark is written geared towards is the shortest gospel in the book of in a Bible, and it is read during the Great Lent, right?
Yes.
And then from Pascha and all the way until Pentecost or Sunday of All Saints, I guess it is the Gospel of Saint John. So
Mm.
we read all of those four. So it's quite interesting. Ocha, as I wanted to thank you for this for this helping this explaining this matter. I also wanted to ask you the generally the issue of immunization and stuff like that. How does our church view that?
Well, it's a question of medicine. It's something that the medical profession works on, provides, and as a result of that, many people are still alive and walking about that might otherwise not be with us. So we encourage for spiritual issues. We should go to the church. We should pray. We should consult with our pastors, with our bishops, and for medical issues, well, unless the pastor is also a doctor, well, then we go to doctors. And by the way, there is a very famous saint, a rather a recent saint Luke of
Simferopol,
uh, I,
Kremski,
pardon me.
Simferopol.
Yes, Saint
Simfer-
Luke of Simferopol, exactly. Yes, who was both. He was a clergyman and also a doctor as well, and he was able to do very complex operations that other doctors could not do, and so he did both. But the other interesting thing is that he would walk around in public with a cassock, and this was at a time when the Soviet authorities very much frowned on anybody doing that, but he was permitted to do it simply because of the fact that his medical skills were so respected. So he was permitted to walk about with a cassock and with a cross and so on.
Mhm, mhm. And
Saint
he
Luke of
was.
Simferopol.
It was interesting, that there's a story about Saint Luke of Simferopol when he walks with cross and a cassock. When he was walking in the city, a couple people stopped him. A couple younger people stopped him. And they started pointing and started ridicule him, saying that you're dark ages, and stuff like that. Uh, and it was interesting that the car came, had approached them, approached St. Luke of Simferopol, from the hospital, saying, Doctor so and so, please come because we need your intervention into something. Somebody from very important from the Soviet state came and needed to be operated on. So he sat in the car. He drove away back to the hospital. And but they called him was the word temnota,
Yes,
darkness.
darkness. Yes,
So in Ukrainian language, that temnota means uneducated,
it's
you
both
know
darkness and ignorance.
ignorance. That's right. So
Ignorance, yeah.
but he did not fight back. He just smiled at them. He says, "Well, each to its own," kind of thing. So you, you believe in what you believe. I believe in what I believe, kind of thing. So it's quite interesting. And I do believe that also of Saint Luke of Simferopol's permission to wear a cassock and be a priest and a doctor came straight from Stalin, because there was a big controversial
The screen just froze.
controversy. Sorry?
I think you were about to say that he got his permission from the very highest authority. I think that it was actually Comrade Stalin himself who permitted it. I
Yes.
believe it was.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's interesting also, that once we started talking about heavenly protection of saints in our life, where I am from, I was born not too far away from Pochaev, Skalavra, and and there's a newly glorified saint in Pochaev is what's his name? Amphilochi Pochaevsky,
Yes. And he
Saint Amphilochi.
also had medical proficiency.
Well, he was. It was interesting because he was very much persecuted. He was a very prayerful man. There's recollection of the fact that during the World War II, he also was he also was a he had a healing capability, and he was
That's it.
tending to Voyne Upa, Ukrainian insurgent army
Mhm.
soldiers. He was helping out and sharing his bread, and after World War II, he was arrested, and he was also taken to in Pochaevska Lavra, where it is now the hospital, so where it is the monastery. In the center of that monastery, there was a right now it's a hotel, but before that, it was a psychiatric hospital. Where lots of people from this who were against the Soviet state would be sent, and of course they were given a different type of medication, and and a doctor, and there's a story, and I don't remember exactly clear that story, but it was interesting. He says doctor calls him, major of KGB calls him to his office, who was a central doctor in that hospital, calls him to the office and says, uh, can you heal all the people here? If you're such a believer, can you heal all the believers, all of those people who are here in the hospital? And Pilohi looks at him and says, yes, I can. He says, well, go do that. So it will save the state lots of money. He says, well, I need the gospel and I need a holy water. You know? And of course, he wasn't given that, and I also believe that Svetlana Alliluyeva, which was daughter of Stalin, who interceded for
Yes.
him, and because he was tortured basically in there, he was put in general population, he was tortured there, he was given some kind of those psychotic injections and so on,
Psychotropic medication.
psychotropic medication, yes, and once he was released from there, he went straight to live in what do you call it, in the ville in to his sister's place. Basically, he
Hmm.
lived in his sister's place
Yes.
in Kremenetsky rayon near Pochayev, and lots of people were coming to him to be healed, to listen to him. And every day he would bless water, and lots of people would come to
Yes.
him.
He'd
And
give them blessed water. Right.
yes, yeah. What was interesting is actually, well, there was many testimonies of healing by this Saint Amphilochi. But what was interesting that people would, all, of course, bring him some money, would bring him some food, and everything that was brought on that day, he would just, because he lived in Litnya Kuchnia in a small shed next to his sister's house, everything that was brought to him. He had big 2 tables and 4 tables in the garden where he lived. He would put it on the table, and they would all have lunch together. Whoever would come, no matter from how far away, And he would see the people who would come from far away, mother with children. He would see how they dressed, and he would take the money that he received and share. All the money was the children, was whoever was there. He never kept anything for him. And I do believe that he. I don't know what you do. You remember the recount how he died?
I read about it. I even wrote something about it, but exactly how I don't remember.
I think it was, if I do not mistaken, please forgive me for that. I believe that he was killed by someone close to him. either
Yes, I
take
believe so. Yes,
either poisoned or taken to the swamp and
poisoned, I believe.
poisoned and stuff like that.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, because they wanted to get rid of him, and finally somebody was found who would be willing to give him poison.
Yeah, and it is interesting that the person who poisoned him, he gave him his forgiveness.
That's
Saint
right. Yes,
Ambrose gave him his forgiveness because he knew what was happening, and he forgave him basically at that point of time.
yes,
So that was it's an amazing story, and I do
definitely.
believe that it is true because like I even in my village, there are a number of people who would go there almost on annual basis or twice a year and would meet him, and when I
I
was
believe
growing up,
the article I wrote on Amfilochi Pochaevsky, I believe it was at one point, it was available on the UOCC website. I don't know whether it still is or not.
yeah, I'll check it as we having conversation. But that is a very nice, like I said, it's a very nice saint. Not well, not nice saint, but it's a
Amazing
very
saint, yes.
good saint to talk
Every
about.
saint is amazing. Some are perhaps a little more amazing than others. Amfilochi is definitely one of them.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
among other things, he was the one who was helping the soldiers of Upa who were in the forest, hiding, the insurgents, and he was helping them too.
mhm. There's also another story, and I think that it was Father Angel that shared it with me that he did not live at Pochaev Lavra. He lived at the cemetery there. There was a small chapel near the Lavra, and he was ordered to be executed, by KGB squad. So he was almost being shot, and the monks from the monastery saw it, and they started to make noise, and they started begging the commanders not to do it and stuff like that. So that's how his life was spared at that point of time. Again, it's just a story that have
Hmm.
been told, a pious and nice stories, but I can't verify it, neither verify it nor deny it, so
I
I
don't
keep it
remember that one, but that may have been
so
the case.
yeah, yeah. So it's quite interesting. Talking about the saints, I and I just wanted to kind of finish up our conversation today was about the Great Lent. But talking about the saints, I when I was taking courses at St. Paul's University, was Father Maxim. It was maybe it wasn't Father Maxim. Yes, it was his Father Maxim. We were talking about asceticism,
Hmm.
and there's an amazing story, of course, of predecessor of Paisi Velichkovsky, and that is Saint Neil of Sora. He was a
Hmm.
Russian Orthodox saint, right?
Yes.
Who went to the Sora River, who actually did read the how do you say it? So Saint Neil Sorsky, he was the one that went to Mountain Athos, and he went to the Middle East, went Saint Ephraim the Syrian. He traveled all the monasteries, and he also went to Mountain Athos. He lived there for a couple of years, and he was the one that uh, what's the name? Як вони називаються мовчазні? Uh,
Oh, hmm, the
the Greek word for it. Uh,
yeah, I can't remember what the Greek word is. Anyhow,
okay,
it's the unspeaking, the ones who did not speak.
so Hezekiah, right? Hezekias.
The
Hezekiah.
Hesychasts is something else. The Hesychasts were the ones who practiced
Practice
the
Jesus
Jesus
Christ.
prayer.
Yeah.
The Jesus prayer,
So
yes.
basically, sorry, he was the one that came back from there, was tonsured in Mountain Athos, came back and went from he was of a noble descent, and yet he went to live in Sora and swamps. He went to live and spend that life in prayer. As a Hezekiah, spending time praying the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of living God, have mercy upon me, a sinner.
Saint Nilus of Sora,
Saint
or
Elias of
they also
Sora.
say Saint Nilus Sorsky.
Yes. So what was interesting is like when you read his житие or his life, uh, he is the reason why I'm saying he's an amazing saint is because he was the voice in the Russian Orthodox Church at that time who spoke against possessors. So there
Hmm.
was a movement of possessors that churches and monasteries possessed lots of property, and
That's
it was
right.
like actually a political movement, very much supported by Tsar at that point
And
of time.
he
Go
was
ahead.
opposed by Saint Joseph of Volokolamsk.
That's right. That's right.
Nilas of Sora said there should be no the monks' monastery should not have all kinds of lands and property,
and
whereas
s-
Joseph
and
of
and
Volokolamsk
peasants.
said no, no, it's okay, we should have. God gives us, we'll do good with it, and so on. Two
Yeah, and
opposite
it's interesting.
views, and both of them are canonized by the church. Both
Well,
Nilas and Joseph of Volokolamsk.
the difference is Saint Joseph of Volokolamsk had been glorified right after his death. Saint
Yes,
Niloslavsky had
it
been
took a while
glorified
for Nilas to be.
300 years later. So that's kind of interesting story, a different story. But he was the one that spoke against the possessors, right?
Yes,
He was the one that spoke. In Novgorod and in Moscow, Oprichniki burned because there was Judaizers in those cities. It was Protestant movement at that point of time, and the church was the blessing of the Tsar had burned them, like right, like literally, almost like Inquisition that was taking place in the West. And he was adamantly speaking against violent means to convey truth of Orthodox faith. So and of course he was shut down and he was never heard of. And but he had a huge number of followers, like in there because he lived what he believed. He lived his belief. Everything that he was making, he was tent making. He was getting berries. He was making baskets, and he would sell that, and all the money that he would get, he would buy food and he would share it with his brothers in the monasteries, or the poor people would come in there. He would share with them. He lived truly that non-possessor's way that monks are called to do. And the reason why I'm bringing it is, like I said, we started talking about amazing saints that Orthodox Church has. I think that it's our church is filled with the stories of wonderful saints who had
indeed.
glorified God with their deeds, and those are our beloved ones that we like to remember those. And of course, Saint Paisi Velichkovsky, who had been glorified also later on, had to run to Moldova and then to Romania, right?
Right.
From his statements against the Tsarist regime, or against the possessors, against the those authorities. Again, he had been glorified also in 20th century only, if I'm not mistaken, Ocha.
Yes, he's very quite recently glorified.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So interesting. And what would be your favorite saint that you would like to that you normally like to recall, Ochi?
There are a good many of them. I would think the name that comes to mind is Saint Seraphim of Sarov.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, a remarkable saint who is frequently portrayed in icons with a bear beside him,
Yes. Yeah.
because he had there was a wild bear that would come to visit him, and he would give him sugar cubes. And on one occasion it is said that a nun came to visit uh, Father Seraphim. He lived in the forest in his own little hut, and a nun came to visit him to get his blessing. And uh, and to her amazement, she sees this large bear beside him, and she let out a little scream, and Saint Seraphim patted the bear and pointed the bear, "Go to the forest, go to the forest." The bear lumbered away, and she said, she comes up to him, and he says, "What troubled you, my daughter?" And she said, "Well, it was the bear. There was this terrible bear beside you." He says, "Oh, but you don't understand." He says, "Here, just stay." And he goes, he waves, and the bear comes lumbering back. And the and Saint Seraphim puts the sugar cubes in the hand of the nun, and he says, "Give it to him." She says, "No, no, no, he'll eat me. No, no, he won't. He won't." So she held out the hand very timidly, and the bear nuzzled and took the sugar cubes. And she describes that at that moment, when the bear took the sugar cubes from her hand, she had the sense that she was in paradise, where humans and animals are not in conflict but are living in complete harmony. So that's one of the
It,
stories about Seraphim of Sorrow.
it's interesting also that his life story was written by his mecenat, his supporter, Vorotilo, right? Is that
And,
that's his name?
Motovilov, I think,
Motovilov. That
Nicholas Motovilov. Yes.
yeah, Motovilov. And it's interesting that in this that book, I'm terrible with names. That's why I'm really apologizing for that. It's interesting that in that book he also said that something that Saint Seraphim of Sorrow was the one that greeted everybody whenever he had liturgy on Sunday. Christos Voskres, right?
Yes, he would say it always. Whenever people came to see him, he'd say, "Christos voskres moja radost." Christ
And
is
then yeah,
risen, my joy. He would
my
call
joy.
everybody my joy, moja
Yes.
radost.
So it's interesting, like and how
An
and
amazing
he's
man. And the thing is, even though he was a monk, he never wore a monk's habit. He was always dressed in peasant regular peasant clothes, even though he was a very respected monk.
yeah.
But he lived, of course, in his own place. But he would gather together with others to pray and so on, and many people would come to see him.
So he was a Cenobitic cleric, right? Like the
Cenobitic, yes.
Cenobitic cleric. Yeah. So it's again,
Actually, no, no, no. Cenobitic is those who live together in community. I would say that he was probably more, you would say, idiorhythmic. In other words, he followed his own rhythm because he did not live in the monastery. He lived in a hut in the forest.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's Cenobitic, and then there's all of those terminologies. I keep forgetting all of that stuff.
Cenobitic and idiorhythmic.
Okay.
And I think there's a third one which I can't remember.
But that he definitely was not a communal. Did not live in a community. He lived
He
it.
did not. He mostly did not live in community with the other monks. He lived on his own. But even if monks do not live in community with others, they do still gather together for prayer and so on. It is not that they break communion. As a matter of fact, when they do that, usually it is with the blessing of the elder, the superior to whom they are their spiritual father, to whom they offer obedience.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a
Excellent.
story about Saint Simeon the Stylite, who had a very unusual style of asceticism. He built a pillar, and he never came down from that pillar. He was on the pillar praying all the time, making prostrations and so on. Food and the water would be sent up to him. He'd pull it up with a cord, and then one day, the other monks came to the abbot and said, "Well, Saint Simeon is doing that because he's full of pride, because he thinks he's such a holy man that he can't live with us." And so the abbot said, "Okay, I'm going to go check this out." So he goes to the pillar, and he says, "Simeon, I don't want you living on the pillar anymore. I want you to come down right away." And Saint Simeon immediately started coming down to the abbot. And the abbot saw that, and he said, "No, it's okay. You can stay up there. It's all right," because he could see that it was not a question of pride. He was completely ready to be obedient, but it was his particular vocation to be praying there on that pillar.
Mhm. So,
By the way, the word stilus in Latin means a pillar, so that's why he's called Saint Simeon the Stylite. There's a number of such saints uh, who uh, did their obedience, their prayers, and so on the pillar. And I think the motivation for that was so that people could see that it is possible to live completely dedicated to prayer. And in other words, there's nothing hidden. They live completely openly because everybody can see everything that they're doing, and that it's possible to live that way.
Mhm.
Probably a very extreme uh, fulfillment of Jesus' commandment, where he says, let your light so shine before all people that they will see it and glorify your Father who is in heaven."
Святий Stolpnik, right?
Stopnik in Ukrainian is Stopnik, yes.
Yeah, Наступник.
Наступишили.
Again, Ocha, I just wanted to ask you if you would be so kind to kind of stop a couple and talk a couple minutes about the obedience, послушание,
Mhm.
the meaning of that in our church.
Well, obedience is a very, very important thing because one of the things that keeps us away from God and fulfilling our vocation with other people is our own pride. Pride is a very dangerous thing. And the best way to overcome pride is to be in obedience. That doesn't mean that if some that that means that you have to do whatever anybody tells you to do. There is a point where it's always a choice that you make, right? And you might be sometimes be asked to do something very which you disagree with. Then it is you to choose, should you be obedient to that or not. But especially for monks, it's a truly one of the most important values that they are given, is in order to overcome their the ego, to overcome egoism, and to be able to dedicate oneself completely to God and to one's fellow man. It's important that that ego be set aside, and the way to do that is to be in obedience. So a monk is always going to be in obedience to the abbot, and in the same way as clergy, we are to be obedient to our bishop, to our dean, right? As the faithful, we are to be obedient to the spiritual fathers as well, and so on. Sometimes it is important for a priest, a spiritual father, to be obedient to his to the ones that he is counseling and guiding as well. It's not a commandment that you follow blindly. It's one uses some discernment as to when it's called for. But uh, if you one were to say what is the safest way to go, the safest way is to go to be obedient. Anybody, especially those in authority who give you some commandment that you have to do, it is to be obedient to them. Of course, by doing that, we are following the example of Christ. Remember Christ when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was praying, realizing that what he is being called to do is to offer himself to be crucified. Right?
Mhm.
He goes, he prays 3 times in the garden. He says, "Father, if it's possible that this cup can be removed from me, let it be. Nonetheless, not as I will, but as you will, Father." And so he prays that 3 times. And then he has this impression, yes, this is what the Father wants him to do. He wants him to accept to be crucified. And so from that point on, there is no longer any conflict, any questioning. He very calmly and faithfully and patiently and humbly accepts all the abasement and the humiliation and the torture that is given to him. So this is the example that he gives us, and of course, at the end, he is not defeated. He defeats death itself by his sacrifice on the cross.
I do. I just found the Gospel of St. John, chapter 14, and in chapter 14, what Christ says. It says, "He who has my commandments and keeps them, he is who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. If a man loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him also, and we will come and make our home with him. He who does not love me does not keep my word, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me. So there's couple examples of obedience if you were to look at it. It's chapter 14 verses 21, 24. It's actually even in when he speaks, Christ speaks, incarnated word, part of the Trinity, speaks in this world, he does not speak, and if you do not listen to me, you know Father will punish you and stuff like that. So he says that. And he says, and the word which you hear is not mine but the Father's, Heavenly Father, a part of that, and who sent me here too. So out of obedience again.
And one of the final things on the cross that he says is, Father, forgive them. Addresses the Father. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, they know what they do. It's again very, very, very basic part of our life, because I mean, I have a conversation with one gentleman, and he's telling me, no, obedience is actually a power trip. Is for people, for the clergy, to keep control over other people, over the faithful. It's to have that obedience. And
Yeah, if it's power tripping, then that's a corruption of what obedience is meant to be. Obedience is not meant to give anybody a power trip. Obedience is meant to overcome our egoism, our self-centeredness, and to go outwards towards God, towards other people, and so on. There are times when one should not obey things. There's, as a matter of fact, even the apostles said when they were commanded by the leaders of the people, the religious leaders, to stop preaching in the name of Jesus. They didn't say that we won't, but they said they put a question to them, a very Jewish approach. He says, "You tell us what is better, to obey humans or to obey God?" And so we will not stop proclaiming this name, because the answer is, of course, you should obey God rather than humans. But
mhm,
this doesn't mean that humans are not qualified to give God's commands to us, but not always, because sometimes it is a power trip, sometimes it is a wrong thing to do. So blind obedience is not the thing that's called for. There is always discernment, questioning is involved, prayer, and so on. But even though you may not be inclined to be obedient, and because of course our egoistic nature doesn't like to take orders, right? It's a good question for us to check ourselves. Okay, why is it that I don't want to obey? Why don't I want to obey this thing? And if the answer is not a good one, then you put your pride aside and say, no, I will obey this, because this is the right thing to do.
mhm. It's also interesting. I'll share a little story. I have a cousin in KU, a really religious man, not I'm not quite sure faithful, but religious man, who comes to church every Sunday, who during the COVID-19 was taking communion every Sunday. He did not believe in wearing masks, still does not believe in that. But he's very smart and educated guy. He speaks English and French, and a couple other languages. And but he's he quite often goes to either to Mountain Athos or goes to Pochaye or to Keo Pechaska Lavra, and he has those the duhovniki, and it's interesting that when he has duhovniki, he's they're telling him how to
Spiritual
do things.
fathers.
Yeah, spiritual fathers, yes, they tell him what's right, what's wrong, that Poroshenko is product of devil and this and that stuff like that. So And of course, when he talks to me, he tells me that type of stuff. He said, "Don't you ever do this?" And it's no. And I was and it was interesting. If you read the patristic literature, special literature from for the monasteries, even if you read Anthony Bloom or Sophrony Sakharov, or their predecessors, from the authors, you really get the sense that really those who are what you would call it, spiritually enlightened, to be the spiritual father, to give the advice. They don't like to give advice.
That's right.
They do not like to give advice. They never say, "Oh, you do this, and you pick up this, and you can do this," and you tell them that and stuff like that.
Anybody
Rather,
who's
they
in a
say,
hurry to give you advice, you just check that to make sure that that's what is really going on there, because sometimes that itself is an ego trip. And
"Yeah,
spiritual fathers and priests and bishops are not above the temptations to do ego trips. It is possible.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely." So again, like when you read the patristic literature, truly, the conversation was those elders or spiritual fathers that like to do that. Usually takes whenever somebody asks the question, usually it's almost like a psychotherapy session, saying, "Well, why do you ask that question?
Hmm.
What bothers you? What makes you not why would you like to, what makes you want to know the answer?" and stuff like that.
Yes.
So basically, like, you cannot just come to somebody in Pochaev or wherever, that doesn't know you from the hole in the ground, and he right away gives you all of the instructions and stuff like that, because you
One
don't
of
know what's happening.
one of the ways in which they like to guide is they like you to guide you to reach the conclusion yourself,
Yeah,
to do it properly yourself, because really the most authentic decisions that we make are decisions that we ourselves make.
absolutely.
So just to do something just because somebody has told you to do it, it's okay. It's a form of obedience, but to be really authentic, it has to be something that you yourself decide. You can seek counsel, you can even ask somebody to tell you what to do, but ultimately you're the one who has to decide.
Yeah, you
God
can
has
take all the
given us the
opinions you can
gift of
get.
making decisions. When we make decisions, it's a gift that God Himself has given us, a gift and a responsibility and an honor that He Himself has given us.
That's right. That's right. The final decision is ours.
Yeah.
Well, Oche, I don't think there is any more questions on the from the
I just
floor.
wanted to say that having made a decision, we should be humble about it as well. We should not be, it's not a question of being stubborn. I decided and that's it. We should be humble. We should be willing to question the decision we've made and so on. We shouldn't get angry if somebody's questioning it. If somebody's questioning it and we get angry, then you know it's a decision that was based on your ego rather than on your responsibility and gift of making good decisions.
Yeah,
Prayer has to be involved as well.
absolutely, absolutely. Is there any questions that people would be interested to know something? Because if there isn't, we still
I
didn't.
don't. I see people are commenting, but I don't see any questions really.
Yeah, I
By the way, I
just
see my dear cousin John Bodnaruk and my niece Claudette is listening to us, so I greet them, and it's good to know you're there.
yeah, and since we didn't have a chance to touch upon the Great Lent, well, that would be the topic of the
It's
next.
coming up.
That's right. I just wanted to say that I found this, wanted to share this book. It's called A Book on Repentance by Saint Theophan the Recluse.
Mm-hmm.
A very good reading, actually, for the Great Lent, for that matter, on
I have to know
repentance.
Ukrainian to do that, of
Uh,
course.
the full name of the book is Про покаяння, причастя святих Христових таїнств і виправлення життя. And that's exactly readings for the holy, for the Lent. It's on repentance, communion of the Holy Christ mysteries, and change in our lives. Really, really nice book. Well written. It's easily written. It's written in small pieces, digestible pieces, so you don't need to read it as a novel and stuff like that. It's just a piece to read, to think about the passage of the gospel, and kind of think about for a day. Oche, I'd like to thank you once again for your participation here today, for your leadership here today. Unfortunately, that's Volodymyr did not show up. I'm just not.
He's probably. I am sure he's praying for us.
Of course.
Yes, of course. As is Father Taras.
Yeah, well, Father Taras had sent a text message apologizing for not.
Yes, that's right.
Being able to make it today. I just wanted to say that tomorrow. Well, I'm not quite sure if there's anybody watching from anywhere else but my parish in Ottawa from Ontario. Tomorrow I will have a discussion with John Holuk on the same channel with John Holuk about parish reopening policies, processes that are involved in doing it properly according to the government regulations. So for those, I found it to be a very timely and interesting conversation. And for those who would like to watch it, it's going to be tomorrow at 8 o'clock at night. And recording of, if somebody wants Father Hladio's record, I have a text of his conversation about, на здоров'я, Оченько.
Дякую, щоб ви були здорові.
То ви казали, що you were saying that didn't bug you, that immunization shot,
Oh,
you know. So.
I from time to time, I notice that when I'm sitting in front of the computer, I think there's dust particles or something. From time to time, I notice that I sneeze when I'm in front of the computer.
I'm just kidding, Oche. It has totally nothing to do with it. So on Monday, we had a conversation with Father Bogdan Hladio on the process of electing a new metropolitan in our church. You know, it was very interesting, really well attended. So if anybody wants the copy of that, I have a copy of that presentation, text of that presentation to share. And next Thursday, we're meeting again as clergy of Ottawa-Montreal Mission District. And next Friday, I have a visiting guest, again online, is going to be here on the same venue. And it is going to be a conversation about addiction to pornography as a spiritual disease. And it's going to be Father Dr. Roman Ritzer going to be presenting that on the same venue, same channel. So for those who are interested to listen to this, you know, it will be interesting because, again,
taping it?
Sorry, it's going to be recorded. It's going to be recorded like today's conversation. So таке воно. Отче, будемо закінчувати тоді молитвою. Я скажу, Отче, молитву, а ви скажіть це благословення. Добре? Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Богородице Діво, радуйся, благодатна Марія, Господь з тобою, благословена ти в жонах і благословений плід утроби твоєї, бо ти породила Христа Спаса душ наших. Слава Отцю і Сину Святому Духу, нині повсякчас, на віки вічні. Амінь. Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй, Отче, благослови.
Нехай будуть милості великого Бога і Спаса нашого Ісуса Христа за усіма нами.
Амінь. Дякуємо вам, Отче, від Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа. Амінь. Дякуємо вам, Отче. Всього найкращого всім нашим глядачам. Ну і тепер цілий місяць будемо в четвер ввечері. Спаси вас, Господи. Дякую всім. Добраніч.